Man, it is so good to be with Plywood Presents today. My good friends Jeff and Andre Schenenberger, incredible movement that they've curated here in Atlanta, a movement of entrepreneurs and innovators who are truly making a difference in our culture and in our city. And I couldn't be more excited to be here with you today. Man, we are living, as Sam just said, we are living in unprecedented times in many ways. But I want to challenge us today that the reality of the fact is that these are not unprecedented times. We have been here before. And I want to talk us through that today as we think about it. And the subject that I want to talk to us today about is seeing clearly when it is raining. Seeing clearly when it is raining. Our family just moved to a new part of the city of Atlanta. It's a place called Plywood Forest, and we moved there primarily for a school that's in that particular neighborhood. We wanted to go to a place where all of our kids could thrive, and we felt like the Forest School was a great place for them. And one of the reasons we love the school, there are many, but one of the reasons we love the school is because our kids have the ability to walk from our home to the school every day. And so yesterday, about 3:30, when it was time for them to get out of school, I noticed that it was starting to rain. So I texted my son and said, "Hey, do you want me to come pick you up?" And it was crickets on the other end of the phone. And so after a few more minutes, I started to notice that the rain was really starting to pick up. And then so I texted my daughter and said, "Hey, do you want me to come pick you up?" And she texted and said, "Oh, no, we're fine." And I was like, okay, really? And so after a few more minutes, I noticed, man, the rain is really picking up. And by this time, the rain's coming down sideways outside. The wind is blowing. It's thunder. It's lightning. And I said, you know what? I need to go check on them. So I jump in the car, start driving toward the school. I'm calling them every few seconds just to try to get a hold of somebody. Nobody's answering. Finally, after about 5 minutes in the car, again, rain coming down sideways, I got a hold of my daughter. And all I could hear in the background was them laughing and screaming with joy and excitement. They were having a blast, running home in the rain. They couldn't see 2 feet in front of them, but they were having a blast. And what I want to talk to us today about is this idea that anybody can see clearly when the rain is gone. But the real art of life is being able to see clearly while it is still raining. This is a picture of what my kids looked like when they got home yesterday, just completely drenched and had a blast. The key to life is to figure out how to thrive in the midst of the storms and to see clearly in the middle of them. On the afternoon of Thursday, March the 12th, I was actually standing in a gravel parking lot outside of the Forest School. And at this time, we were trying to decide, are we going to send our kids here? And so we were there for a full day of preview and testing and all the things that go into that. And I remember standing in this gravel parking lot talking to one of my colleagues at the firm that I founded. And we were talking about the fact that other companies in Atlanta were starting to shut down. And they were starting to send their employees home to work. And we were talking about, should we do the same thing? And eventually at the end of that call, we decided to send our employees home the next day and to leave them home for a couple of days. And I remember my famous last words at the end of that conversation was, we'll send everybody home for a couple of days, and then we'll reevaluate at the end of next week and go from there. Here we are 5 months later. And we still don't have any more clarity today about the situation than we did 5 months ago. You see, we're in the midst of the rain. We're in the midst of the storm. And the fact that these are turbulent days is really the understatement of the century. I mean, everything that we know has been turned upside down. Millions, literally millions all over the world have been impacted by COVID-19. As Sam talked about, I could say the same thing. We all know people who have been drastically impacted. Some have even died from COVID-19. So there's no doubt that this is tragic. Racial and political tensions are at an all-time high in our country. Businesses are being shuttered. The economy is in the tank and in free fall. People's lives have been impacted. I have a couple of friends who, their whole careers, their whole jobs, the companies that they had built have gone upside down overnight. My friend Johnny, who owns a chain of hair salons in a couple of U.S. cities, overnight his business was shuttered. And then once things started to kind of rebound a little bit and they thought they saw some light at the end of the tunnel, looting and rioting went through his particular city and his whole business was decimated again. I got a friend named Elizabeth. She's a Tony Award-winning Broadway actress. She was in rehearsals for a show that was about to come to Broadway. She's actually even working on her own project with the hopes of it coming to Broadway. And in the midst of all this, we were talking with her, and she put the whole pandemic in perspective for me. She said, Aaron, after 9/11, Broadway shut down for 2 nights. But in the middle of this pandemic, we think we're going to be shut down for at least 9 months. People's lives have been drastically impacted. I have 2 friends named Chris. Both of them had thriving businesses, and both of their businesses were full throttle. And then almost overnight, their businesses were going in reverse. My own business has suffered in the middle of this, along with many of you. Future City Now is a firm that we founded really as a glorified side hustle in 2015, really designed to help leaders maximize their future. In 2017, we went full in. We pushed all the chips to the middle of the table and we said, we're going to go for this. And we started building our business and things really started to pick up. And from 2017 to 18 to 19, our business doubled every year. And as we were heading into 2020, we felt like we were going to double again. We had contracts signed that led us to think that we were adding staff and things were going amazingly. We had just launched a big project. We had just signed a strategic partnership with a creative shop out of Ohio, which was going to add 11 more people to our team. And I could go on and on about what our hopes and dreams were for 2020. And then I got the phone calls. The first phone call was from a client who said that the project that we had been working on, strategizing on, dreaming about for the last 24 months was being pulled immediately and was not going to come back. This was a project that we had put a lot of hopes and dreams in. We were hiring staff for. We spent a lot of money on, and it was gone overnight. A couple more days goes by, I get a call from our largest client. And again, same story, a project that we had been working on for 18 months. We've been dreaming about, we've been spending money on. We had just launched it at the big football arena here in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We just launched it the first of the year. Then I get the phone call, it's going away. It's being pulled back. And almost overnight, 75% of our business was gone. Now, in my case, 75% is better than 100%. And I know many that lost 100% overnight. But still, 75% of everything that we had been dreaming toward, everything that we had been planning toward, 75% of our financial future was all gone overnight. And probably most tragic of all is 75% of our clarity for the upcoming year was gone overnight. You see, we had plans. We had staff hired. We knew what we were going to execute on in this year. And then almost overnight, that was gone. And so as I think about where we are right now, as I think about personally where I am right now, the best that I can say is that I'm trying to see clearly in the middle of the downpour. I don't have it all figured out. You don't have it all figured out, I'm sure. None of us know what tomorrow is going to hold. But the best that we can do is to try to see clearly in the middle of this rainstorm. And so I just want to take the few minutes that I have left and just share with you some of the things that I've learned in the middle of this. And maybe even, if I'm honest, some of the things that I'm still learning or that I have to remind myself in the middle of this. The first is I need to embrace the interruption. I need to embrace the interruption. Now, after I typed this slide out, I decided, I didn't like this idea of embracing the interruption. Everybody's told us all along, yeah, you need to embrace the interruption. The truth of the matter is, I think that's a load of BS. I don't want to embrace the interruption. If I'm honest about it, I didn't want to have the interruption in the first place, let alone embrace it. But once I kind of got through the emotion of what had been lost in the interruption, I determined that I'm going to maximize this interruption. I'm going to build on this interruption. I'm going to make the most out of this interruption. And that's the best that I could do. So professionally, I had to make a decision. We're going to maximize this interruption. We're going to pivot our business and control the things that we can control in the middle of it. So what does that mean? That means that we're going to embrace a work from home culture. At first, I was totally against that. I love the creativity that comes from having our team in the same place. We had just opened an amazing office just off the Beltline here in Atlanta. It is incredible. And I love the creativity. I love the spontaneity that comes from having your team together. I love having everybody together. But obviously, that was not an option anymore. And so I had to learn how to embrace the work from home culture. And let me tell you, I was initially resistant. But now it's been the best thing for our company. It's been the best thing for our pace. It's been the best thing for our health. Our team is thriving. We're more efficient than ever. And we're learning how to maximize this disruption. For our family, we've learned how to maximize the disruption. It was an interesting dilemma for us to have to homeschool our children for a few months when they got out last March. We were always the people who said we are never going to homeschool our children. It's not because we're against homeschooling. We love people who do homeschool. We just knew that in our own family, if we were to homeschool, somebody was probably going to die. And we knew that was not going to be good. And so we're not going to be the homeschool people for that reason. But let me tell you, it actually ended up being great. And it gave us new opportunities as a family. One of the opportunities it gave us was that as the country started opening up a few months ago, which I know we're back into shutdown mode now, but a few months ago, things were starting to open up. And one of the things that we got to embrace is that we got to go to and do some travel. We started kind of touring the Northeast. We did kind of a reopening tour of the Northeast. We own an RV. We jumped in it, and we just decided to stay out on the road. And we hit Philadelphia the week that it opened back up, in D.C. the week that it opened back up, in New York City the week that it opened back up, and literally had the places to ourselves. There's one picture that we have with our kids in the middle of Times Square, and nobody is around. Now, we played it safe. We followed all the guidelines. We did everything you were supposed to do, and there were many days where we didn't get very far from our RV or from the Airbnb that we were staying in. But we decided, listen, our kids' camps have been canceled. All their activities for the summer have been canceled. And we're probably never going to get 6 to 8 weeks of uninterrupted time as a family ever again, especially while our kids are living at home. And so we decided we've got to maximize this time. And we did. We made it all the way up to Bar Harbor, Maine, and then came all the way back and had a blast all along the way, maximizing the time. The last thing that we did in our business is we decided we've got to work on some new things. We've got to work on the business and not just in the business. Sam he talked about this just a little bit a minute ago, is that we oftentimes get caught up in the tyranny of the urgent when we're doing our day-to-day business and our day-to-day work. But this interruption gave us an opportunity to work on the business. So we worked on a brand new website that we're going to launch in September. We worked on a brand new portfolio that tells the work that we've done over the last couple of years. We're going to launch that in September. We're able to start working on plans for a new business that we're going to launch out of our business. All things that we would have never taken time for back in February, are all things we found time for in the present situation. So we learned how to maximize where we are. The second thing that we've learned how to do, that I'm learning how to do, is the fact that I am lost in life without Waze. Now, I don't know about you, but Waze on my phone is how I get around. I don't care if I'm just running down to the grocery store. Waze is what I stick into the car, and that's how I get from point A to point B. And the truth of the matter is, I need Waze for my life. I need direction for my life. I need an anchor for my life. And if it weren't for the anchor in my life during this pandemic, I would have been absolutely lost. And the anchor for my life is my faith. And it's in the middle of a pandemic that you call on your faith. And it was really interesting to me. I remember sitting in my home office right in the middle of all this and frustrated by what was going on, frustrated by the loss. And all I could remember was a verse from Scripture that I learned in 5th grade Bible drill. And the verse just said, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. And I just remember sitting there in my home office just repeating that verse minute after minute, hour after hour, day after day. Because in that moment, it was the only thing that I could do. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. And so for all of us, we've got to have a foundation. We've got to have a foundation, something that we lean on in the midst of the storm. And then the last thing that I want to leave us with is that I'm learning in the middle of this season that I need the benefit of the doubt. I personally need the benefit of the doubt from you. And conversely, I need to be a person who gives the benefit of the doubt. I think we have lost all ability in our modern day discourse of giving the benefit of the doubt to others. We immediately look for ways to tear down if somebody doesn't think the way that we think, if they don't act the way that we act. And we never give people the benefit of the doubt. You see, the benefit of the doubt starts with a little word that I think we've lost as well, and that little word is empathy. We've forgotten what it's like to walk in somebody else's shoes. Empathy teaches us that we need to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. We need to consider others more highly than ourselves. We need to realize that our point of view is not the only point of view. Our way of life is not the only way of life. Our way of doing things is not the only way of doing things. Now, again, if I'm completely transparent with you, I would love a world where everybody thought the way that I thought, at least in my mind. I think it would be awesome. If everybody thought the way I thought, then we'd have a perfect world. But man, it'd be an absolutely boring world if everybody thought and acted the way that I thought and acted. You know, we need each other. We need the diversity that each other brings to the table. But if we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt, we end up shutting out that diversity. We end up shutting down the conversation that we all so desperately need to have. And we end up building our own little silos, and we end up building our own little echo chambers. And I tell you what, I don't want to live in a silo, and I certainly don't want to live in an echo chamber. And the reality is, in my lowest moment, I need others to give me the benefit of the doubt. So I need to live my life in such a way that I give others the benefit of the doubt. And that's how we're going to grow as a country. That's how we're going to grow as a human race. As I close today, I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. I want to encourage you around the idea, as I said at the beginning, that these are not unprecedented times. These are not unprecedented times. We, as a human race and as a country, we have been here before. Just think about this. In the 1960s and the early 1970s, Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. The Bronx was literally burning. 4 students had just been shot and killed at Kent State. We had committed over 500,000 troops to an endless and senseless war in Vietnam. We were in the middle of 2 very tumultuous presidencies. We had just come out of the Johnson presidency, which ended in tumult, and then we were into the Nixon presidency by the early 1970s. The world was literally turning upside down. But over time, we were able to emerge stronger and better as a country. In the mid-1860s, things were even worse. The atrocity of slavery ripped our nation in half. Brothers were fighting brothers in a seemingly endless civil war. Over 600,000 people ended up dying in the Civil War. Things were terrible. But it was with that backdrop that Abraham Lincoln stood up to deliver his second inaugural address. As he stood up that day to make that address, there were still more questions about the future than he had answers. He still saw a ton of challenges out in front. Specifically, how are we going to rebuild this country? But as he stood up that day, he stood up with clarity in the midst of uncertainty. And he closed out his inaugural address by saying this: with malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bound up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and for his orphan, to all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. My hope for all of you is that we'll all strive to see clearly in the midst of the storm that we're in. Thank you.